Hello again everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are going to be taking a look at the Next Level Racing Boeing Military Edition SimPit. I've never owned any hardware setup like this before. Generally speaking, I've always had a fairly conservative sim setup previously. Next Level Racing though have been kind enough to let me take a look at their Boeing Military Edition SimPit. It was quite an exciting project to undertake, and I was also very keen to see what sort of a difference having a full custom SimPit actually makes to my overall simming experience. I wanted a sim rig that offers a good all-round solution, one where I can potentially either use a yoke and a throttle or a full HOTAS setup. The Next Level Racing rig looked like a great option, and I went with the military variant primarily based on aesthetics. I quite like the way that the sim rig looks overall. Also, as someone that typically enjoys flying either military aircraft or warbirds within the sim more often than not, I thought the aesthetic there tied in quite nicely with that. So in the video today we are going to be taking a look at the product. We'll review it of course as we go. Firstly, I'll carry out a bit of an unboxing. I'll show you what you're actually getting for your money. We'll briefly run through some details as well regarding the construction of the unit. I'll then show you the Next Level Racing sim rig as I have it configured now with my equipment. So a good opportunity there as well to see my setup for anyone that's interested. And then finally, of course, we'll show the sim rig in action and we can talk about the product to finish up the review. As always, ladies and gents, I do hope you enjoy the video. Whether you're interested in perhaps purchasing the rig for yourselves or whether you're just interested to see my own personal setup. If you like what you see, then please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. We'll start with the unboxing then and we'll work our way through from there. So the room itself, as you can see, is not a big space by any means. In fact, the box pretty much takes up the entire width of the room. As you can see, everything is very nicely packaged. The seat itself is bubble wrapped and we've got some cardboard layered up there as well. At the very top of the box here, we've got what looks like the lumbar support with a bit of branding on there as well. We'll probably need that later on due to my appalling posture. Next up, we have what I suppose is really the star of the show. That is, of course, the seat itself. There's a very nice aesthetic to it, and again that's one of the reasons I actually went for this particular unit. I do quite like the faux military look of the unit overall. And then as well we've got the base of the seat itself. The foam feels to be pretty good quality, and a nice option there as well that we can have the joystick centrally located. That's what we'll be going for later on. So again, we'll just put that to one side for now. The rest of the package is all located in a separate box just below. You can see that's cable tied, so we'll just open that up. But again, overall the quality of the packaging very good. Everything does seem to have been adequately protected. My knife seems to be getting a little bit blunt, but just about able to open up the tape. There's one. And two. So again, a couple of sheets of cardboard there for protection and plenty of nice bits and pieces down below. We've got, for example, there what I think is the keyboard mat, and we have there the mouse mat as well, again with Next Level Racing branded logos as you can see. You can see we've got the instructions there as well. I gather they're pretty easy to follow. We'll talk more about that later on, of course. And finally, a really nice touch as well. Not only do we have all of the necessary fixtures and fittings to set up the equipment, as you would expect, but we also have all of the required tools, which of course makes setup just that much easier. The rest of what's down there is, I believe, the frame of the unit itself. And again, we'll take more of a look at that in just a moment's time. Okay, so we now have everything laid out in the room, and again, as you can see, there's plenty included within the box. Of course, the sim rig itself is by no means a cheap product, so you'd certainly hope that everything felt to be high quality, and indeed that everything you needed was included, and that certainly seems to be the case with the Next Level Racing Boeing SimPit. Once again, as well, we have all of the tools we're going to need included. Having had a look through the instructions, indeed they are very well written out, very clear. All of the parts are detailed as required. I think the instructions are broken down into very nice, easy, simple to follow steps. I do think it's worth saying though in hindsight, firstly it's certainly worth reading the instructions all the way through ahead of time. Some of the steps do seem to be slightly out of order from what I would consider to be logical. You end up having to move things around again to fit various parts later on. Again, overall the quality of the parts as well was very good. Everything felt to be very strong, very sturdy, high quality. So now all there is for us to do is turn this pile of bolts, nuts and metal into something more coherent. I decided not to record the process of actually building the unit itself since there are videos available online outlining that process. Nevertheless, again, I would say that the process was reasonably straightforward overall. Certainly if you're happy enough setting up an IKEA unit, for example, you'll probably be okay as well with the Next Level Racing sim rig. There was just one or two parts, namely I'm thinking of the side mounts. It would have been nice if they'd actually been labelled specifically. It took me a little bit of time to figure out which one goes on which side. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, there was one or two steps as well which I had to backtrack on slightly. But as I say, the frame is overall a very nice quality, very sturdy. You can stand on it wherever you like, you're not going to do any damage. There are one or two bits that aren't quite as sturdy as others. For example, the keyboard mount does have a little bit of give. But certainly all of the areas that matter, where you're going to mount the hardware itself, so for example the joystick or the throttle, they're very rigid, very sturdy. The seat itself is on rails, you can move that back and forward, which does aid somewhat in getting in and out of the seat, although we'll discuss that again later on. Anyway, I'm sure you'll be interested to see what the sim rig looks like with all of the equipment fitted out. So without further ado, let's take a look at the end result. So overall, once again, a fairly limited space here for the setup, but the rig does fit very nicely into the room, and still there is enough room to get in and out with a reasonable degree of comfort. Down on the left we have the Thrustmaster HOTAS Warthog throttle. You can see as well there we've got the joystick mounted centrally. Using a couple of the parts that I had left over, I've actually made a central mount there for my iPad. Down on the right, again, I've actually repurposed a joystick mount there to use as both the mouse mat as well as a mount for the keyboard. Another customization, by having the keyboard mounted down on the right, I've actually repurposed the specific keyboard mount, currently using that as a TV stand. It's probably not an ideal solution, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it's working well so far. So down on the left hand side I've got my Thrustmaster HOTAS Warthog, and again the panel itself, very rigid, very sturdy, no issues there. In the centre we have the Warthog joystick. I like the fact as well you can centrally mount the joystick, there's also the option to mount it out to the side. My only slight issue there with the joystick mounting, I wanted a bit of a twist to the stick overall versus the Pilot. That is still achievable with the product, but I only managed to get 2 screws in to secure the joystick as opposed to the usual 4. Again, it does seem still to be very rigid, very sturdy, it's not been moving around at all while I've been using it so far. And down on the right, as I say, pretty straightforward, just got the mouse, the keyboard, and then my Logitech headset just hanging, as you can see there, off a metal hook. The custom iPad mount as well does work quite nicely. There were other configurations that actually worked better, but not specifically for recording, particularly whilst using TrackIR, so I've gone with the central mount here. I definitely still need to do a little bit of cable management as well, just to tidy things up. And down the back, again the Saitek rudder pedals. I don't know if it's just me, I didn't find a particularly ideal mounting solution for those. I actually had to use a couple of washers and a slightly oversized bolt. I do find that ever so slightly impedes on the rudder pedal movement at times if you're particularly digging your heels in. In terms of the mounting itself, nice options though, you can slide those back and forth by quite a bit, you can also adjust the tilt. For the seat itself, again you do have the faux military ejection seat look, the straps included as well. I fitted the straps here just for the purposes of demonstration, but ordinarily I don't have those fitted to the seat, I find they get in the way a little bit. Nevertheless, I think they look great aesthetically, I think they're a nice inclusion with the product as well. Again, I do find the seat pretty comfortable overall. I like the fact that you can slide it back and forwards. That helps with getting in and out of the rig. As well, it's nice to have the adjustable recline. As far as the quality of the foam goes, pretty good overall. Although I will say, having now used the sim rig for a couple of weeks, I am just starting to notice a slight deformity in the base cushion, of course related to where I'm sitting. As we've already mentioned, the seat itself can be reclined. There are 2 adjustable handles located at the back of the seat. That gives you a pretty decent range overall, which again I do find helps in terms of comfort. Here you can see the sliding mechanism for the seat itself, pretty straightforward, much like you see in many cars. You can just lift that out and the seat will slide back and forth on the rails. As I say, there's a reasonable degree of travel there. My only minor complaint there with the seat mechanism, it's a little bit clunky to use, certainly the seat doesn't glide. And there's no real ratchet mechanism per se, basically just move the seat into the position you want and more or less lock it in place. Anyway, that just about covers the sim rig in terms of its physical qualities. Of course though, I think the more interesting aspect is how it actually functions whilst using it in the sim. So we're going to take a quick lap here around the Orbex Brisbane River Run within Microsoft Flight Simulator. I thought that would give us a good opportunity to throw the aircraft around a little bit, which hopefully will allow you to see the rig in action. As ever, I'll finish up the review with a few points regarding what I do and don't like about the Next Level Racing Boeing Military Edition sim rig. So firstly, in terms of having a dedicated sim rig itself, certainly I do realise this is a bit of a luxury. Certainly I've never had anything like this myself previously. The next level racing sim rig is by no means cheap, but I suppose put into the context of the hobby, it costs less than a graphics card. It's not a whole lot more expensive than, for example, my Thrustmaster Warthog HOTAS setup. Anyway, it goes without saying I think that having a dedicated sim rig, and indeed sim room, is a very nice thing to have. It's brilliant not having to move my controls around all the time, everything's set up and ready to go. Great as well having the controls firmly mounted, particularly with my throttle set up previously. I used to find that slipping around quite a lot. Now everything's locked nicely in place, and it means each time I come back to it, it's exactly where I want it to be. And again, with that level of customization that the next level rig seems to afford, it's brilliant being able to set up a few extra features that weren't included necessarily. For example, having that iPad mount is great for videos. As I'm sure many of you know, I love a good checklist. I do feel that the sim rig, fairly negligibly but ever so slightly, does enhance the way I fly in the sim. Certainly it's easier to fly just that little bit more precisely with everything being locked firmly in place. I think as well another factor that's worth considering is immersion. It does just ramp up the immersion that little bit more. And I think really where the rig is going to come into its own is with VR. I think with those control mountings, as well as the seat itself, and indeed the transducer fitted down the back, it's going to make the rig overall a very immersive VR experience. Certainly looking forward to trying that one out. Anyway, just to recap, really what we've covered so far, running through a few points that I noted during both the delivery, the installation, as well as using the product itself. Firstly, on arrival, the package does come in a protective outer box, which is nice. As I say, the box is pretty heavy, pretty sizable, around 56 kilos. It was all very well packaged though, I didn't see any damage to any of the contents. The same goes with the parts, very high quality overall, I've had no issues there really. I liked as well that the tools came included. I do think at this sort of price point you would expect that, but again, not necessarily always the case. As far as the assembly itself goes, again the instructions are very easy to follow, very clear throughout. Some of the steps do seem out of sequence at a first glance, there are reasons for that, but again it is worth reading the instructions all the way through to get a feel of how you're going to put the product together. As far as fitting my hardware goes, again very happy with the throttle mount, that's working well. Joystick's great, I've got that twist in there now. It would have been nice to be able to fit all 4 screws, but 2 seems to be doing the job. The rudder pedals, I may have missed something there, but once again the solution I've used is a little bit suboptimal, but nevertheless it works just fine. Actually building the rig itself, again, took around 3 hours overall, but I think it was probably about an extra 4 hours of tinkering with various configuration options, various different hardware setups. Whilst the next level racing sim rig is eminently configurable, it's not necessarily always easily configurable. It can take quite some time to adjust certain parts. As far as the seat itself goes, again, I found it to be very comfortable so far. I like the fact that you can move it forward and aft, that certainly helps a little bit in terms of getting in and out of the rig. And the same with the recline, I found there's enough range of motion there to get a comfortable position, at least for me. My only critique of the seat thus far, as I said, I've been using the unit now for a couple of weeks, sat in it for some fairly prolonged periods of time, and I have noticed a bit of a detent there forming in the lower seat cushion. At this stage I haven't noticed any reduction in comfort as a result, but I was rather hoping the foam would be a little bit firmer in that regard. We've touched on it a couple of times, but in terms of getting out of the rig, it's nothing too challenging, but if you are someone that suffers a little bit with range of movement, then I would consider that as a factor. I do find that the next level racing Boeing Military Edition sim rig is a very nice option for flight simulation. As flight simmers, we don't tend to have quite as many options in terms of hardware and equipment, but if you're looking to do something similar, set up a dedicated sim rig, a dedicated sim space, then I think the next level racing options are well worthy of consideration. Thank you very much once again to Next Level Racing for letting us take a look at their Boeing Military Edition sim pit. And thank you very much, as always, to my channel members and patrons for all of your support. Once again, I do hope you enjoyed the video and found it to be of use. If you did, then please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. I do hope that all of you are having a great day wherever you are. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.